Hey folks, David Stewart here. Let's talk about obsolescence some more. Talked about, I did a video on planned obsolescence. Let's talk about avoiding obsolescence. Are there ways to avoid this planned obsolescence or just the cycle of obsolescence? There are, but there's a reason why you end up trapped in the cycle of obsolescence. So if you have one of these beautiful phones, this one's a couple years old now. Eventually it turns into one of these that's really old and basically not usable. I'm like, man, I really want to use my hardware for a long time. I don't want it to just become obsolete because time goes on and software becomes, needing more horsepower and yada, yada, yada. Let's talk about a couple ways and why a lot of people, why I basically ended up still with a smartphone after all of this. So here is a camera that's really not obsolete, even though it's 10 years old. This is my wife's, Canon Rebel. Now, there are newer ones that are a little bit better, right? Maybe have few more pixels. But the pictures that this camera takes are actually still better than these super fancy smartphone pictures. It still doesn't equal the quality of this as far as just still pictures goes. Now there's more like stuff you can do with this. You can change all the color grading and everything on the fly. But when it comes to just the quality of the pictures, this is still better. In fact, I still sell stock photos that I take with this camera. It has a replaceable battery that I can just get a new one from, and I have two. And if I run out of batteries, I can just put a new one in, or if that one goes bad, I can get a new one. It uses SD cards, which are very plentiful. And if I can't find a full-size SD card, I can do a micro SD with an adapter, and it'll work just fine with this. And I have USB reader for it that still works with SD cards. SD cards have been around for a long time. They'll probably still be around for a long time. It's very easy to get the photos off of this. Now, it's slightly harder than the phone because the phone you can just be like, well, I can just post this directly to Facebook. But in terms of taking quality pictures, this is still not obsolete. It's still pretty darn good. And if you were to buy a new one today, it wouldn't have too many extra things going on than this one. And this is a digital camera. This is not an old film camera. But an old film camera is not technically obsolete for what it does, which is to take film photographs. We might call it obsolete because it makes the whole workflow of the way people use photos now, that doesn't work anymore. It's like obsolete if you want to take photos with film. You have to develop them. You have to somehow scan them into your computer to use them in all the modern applications that most people use with photos. But if you were to just as a hobby, like take film photos and develop them, it's not really obsolete for that. The camera design has improved up to a certain point. Then after that, the cameras are all going to be pretty good for a long time until you get digital cameras. I have a really obsolete digital camera, one that's like the photos are too low res for you to do anything with. But these are high enough resolution, even though it's 10 years old. It's still good. I would still use this like shoot things at people's weddings if they want some extra pictures or just whatever, birthday parties. This takes really good pictures still. It's not obsolete, and it's going to remain non-obsolete probably for a few more years. And if it finally breaks down, and buy another one that's just this but slightly better, and it's not going to be obsolete because it's a purpose-built device. So purpose-built devices don't turn this into this. They will much more slowly become obsolete. Here's another one. Right? Trying to replace the phone. This is why you end up with a phone. Oh, I want to record some audio or something. Well, I got to use like a little digital recorder or something. This is not very big. It's fairly convenient. You could put it in your pocket. We're at a lot of devices here. Or you can go with something that still functions after all these years. I have it in this nice little bag, which is my tape recorder. My Sony... I think it's a Walkman brand. I don't know. But yeah, it's a Sony recorder. I could plug a microphone into it and it works. Or I can even change the speed. It's a really good little recorder here. Or like, a micro tape recorder, which you could use for this kind of stuff. But it's like, what are you going to do with a cassette? It's like, well, I have to somehow get it into the computer. We really kind of think of these as being obsolete, but they still work, and they're still going to record audio, and they're always going to record audio, and they're never going to stop functioning the way a cell phone would. So again, it becomes difficult to replace that cell phone. Here's another purpose-built device that actually is not obsolete. Like, this is a Nintendo DS. It's, it's old as heck, right? And it works. It still plays games, which are fun, which is the whole thing about a gaming console. Now it's obsolete, and you can't play Cyberpunk on this. Do you need to play Cyberpunk to have fun? No. Now, here's the benefit of consoles. This is actually a benefit of consoles over, say, a PC, is that when you have this idea of a console generation, is that Nintendo or Sony or whoever, they put out a console, they put out a gaming console. It's one hardware, and they're making that hardware for however many years, and people are going to make games that function on that hardware for a number of years. So when you buy into a console, you're buying into software that will function for a number of years after you've bought the hardware. When you're buying a PC, if you buy like a $400 PC, you probably can't even play modern games on it. And if you do, next year you're in the games that come out next year, you're in like the low, medium settings era, and then pretty soon it's potato, and you can't really run anything other than maybe like classic WoW and EQ on it or something like that. So PCs tend to get sucked into that cycle a lot more, but consoles actually preserve it. Now, I can go plug in my Super Nintendo, play all my Super Nintendo games. Now, it's obsolete in the case that you're like, well, it doesn't play Cyberpunk, but it plays all the games that were made for it just as good as when I bought it, or when my parents bought it, back in 1990 or whenever we got the Super Nintendo. So all that stuff still works. So game consoles are a way that you actually avoid this cycle of things becoming obsolete. Now, they are planned to be obsolete. The game company plans to make a next console which is better and makes that other one obsolete and get you to buy the new one. But if you were to buy a PlayStation 3, there's a huge catalog of PlayStation 3 games. All of them, not all of them, but there's lots of fun ones in there, and it'll, if you buy like a launch version, you can play the PlayStation 2 games, you can play the PlayStation 1 games. You have this huge catalog of games which work. They're not obsolete, they work. Just like how a book doesn't become obsolete. Your book doesn't, it's like, oh, my book has become obsolete. A biology book can become obsolete because the knowledge in it is no longer accurate, but, your Lord of the Rings copy doesn't become obsolete. It's the same thing with gaming consoles. Like, the Super Nintendo is not obsolete simply because it's old. It still plays all those fun games today, and that's pretty cool. So that is something that I think is good for avoiding this obsolescence thing. But you can see the problem of, like, trying to carry around lots of things to replace a phone. You end up with like a whole backpack full of gear to try to replace all the functions of this, and you still aren't there because, well, I got to take these, put them on my computer, upload them to Facebook or Twitter or whatever I happen to be doing, or get them into a DAW program. Yeah, you could use an 8-track tape recorder that like we used to use in the 90s or whatever. But then what do you do with the music? How do you get that music to people to listen to it? Well, you got to put it on a computer, and you got to do this whole thing. You got to get back into that obsolescence cycle. Likewise, I could write a book on a 1995 Macintosh, which is where I wrote my first book. Wrote my first book on actually, I think the Mac was from 1994. I wrote my first book on a Macintosh from 1994. Well, I want to get that book. What am I going to do with it? I don't know. How do I get it off of the Macintosh? I can't even like connect that thing to the internet. Well, I have to save it to a floppy and find another computer that has a floppy drive and get it off the floppy and then convert it to a modern format and then convert it to, before you know it, it's like I can't really use a 1995 Macintosh to write a book without adding a bunch of extra steps that just involve hardware that's part of that obsolescence cycle in order to get it to people to read, right? Or even to, I want to submit this to an agent. What am I going to do? Print it out on my laser writer and then like mail it to him the way that you used to do like in the ancient days? Now they're like, email it to me. I can't email it. My 1995 Mac doesn't connect to the internet anymore. Oh, well, I don't know what you have to do. I guess you have to somehow get it onto a PC, a modern PC or Mac, and then email it. Well, you're back in that. have to buy some modern hardware to do it. It's a lot of difficulty with modern technology to completely avoid the cycle of obsolescence. But with some things you can, and I think gaming consoles are a really great way. If you buy an older gaming console, you could probably get a PS3 for very little money. Even a launch one you could probably get for like less than $200, and it probably will come with a bunch of games because the people consider it obsolete. But are the games suddenly not fun because they were made 15 years ago? I don't think so. I think that there's tons of fun games for that platform, and really for any platform. PlayStation 2, PlayStation 1, Nintendo, NES still has lots of fun games that exist for it. So if you look at it from that perspective, then the gaming console really is never obsolete. You're just buying, a generation, access to a generation of software. And I actually think that that's a big benefit of the whole console versus PC thing. So yes, you can avoid cycles of obsolescence. Like, I need a phone with the best pictures. Yeah, if you just had a really good camera for when you cared about taking pictures, this is never really going to go obsolete, or it's going to go obsolete so slowly that it's going to take a long time. Likewise, other things like guitars don't go obsolete, lava lamps don't go obsolete. It's mostly has to do with our relationship to the bigger technological sphere. Like, how do I get my book for people to read? Well, I have to have some sort of modern hardware that's part of that in order to just get it up onto the Kindle platform. You can only go so old with your hardware before things really just start to not function. So anyway, there's that. Thanks so much. Leave me your thoughts down below. Some other ways to avoid that cycle of obsolescence that tends to happen. Leave me some, especially with cars. I don't think cars go obsolete really. If they do, it's very, very slowly, and it's other kinds of things that tend to go obsolete. Knowledge goes obsolete, and the bleeding edge of technology and software and the way those interact, that's really what causes a lot of our modern obsolescence. So thanks so much, and I'll see you guys next time.